The stories you're about to hear are not easy to forget. These are creepy tales from state parks, where the peaceful surroundings hide some very strange and unsettling events. Some of these stories are based on real things that happened, while others are full of mystery. Either way, they are all disturbing in their own way. If you're ready to hear them, just remember, sometimes the danger in the woods isn't what you think it is.
Story 1.
When I was 10 years old, my aunt and uncle invited me to join them and my cousins on a camping trip to Tishomingo State Park in Mississippi. It was the summer of 2002, and I was really excited. My parents both worked full-time, so going on a real vacation felt like a big deal. My cousins were Elliot, 13, Phoebe, 9, and Liam, 7. They were all packed into their family RV when they picked me up that Friday morning. I noticed right away something was wrong with Elliot. While Phoebe was playing her Game Boy and Liam was bouncing around asking if we were there yet. Elliot just sat there staring out the window looking nervous. I asked him if he was okay. I dropped my backpack on the floor and slid over next to him. He looked at me, then looked out the window again, saying that he was fine. My uncle started driving and my aunt turned around from the passenger seat. "We should get to Tishomingo in about 3 hours, everybody. Trav, there are snacks in the cooler if you get hungry." I thanked her and settled in for the drive. After about an hour, when Phoebe had fallen asleep and Liam was watching a movie on the tiny TV they had installed, I nudged Elliot. "Seriously, what's wrong with you? You look like you're heading to the dentist or something." He sighed and said in a low voice, "We went to Tishomingo last year too." "Yeah? Well, wasn't it fun?" "Something happened," he said. "Nobody believes me about it." I leaned in closer. "What happened?" he began. It was the second night we were there. I had to pee real bad in the middle of the night, but the toilet in the RV was clogged up. Dad said he would fix it in the morning, but I couldn't hold it. "So, you went outside?" I asked. "Yeah. There's a bathroom building about 200 yards from where we parked." I took a flashlight and went, but I didn't make it all the way there. I asked him, "Did you go in the bushes?" He nodded, but while I was peeing, I heard this noise like someone mumbling, but not in English. I don't think it was coming from the bushes, maybe 30 feet away from me. I love stories like this. Even if it scared him, I sort of smiled. "What did you do?" I pointed the flashlight over there, and I saw a man crouching in the bushes, except he had the head of a boar. Not like a mask or anything. It was part of him. He was mumbling and digging in the dirt with his bare hands. "No way!" I wasn't sure whether to believe him. "I'm not making this up," Elliot insisted. "I ran back to the RV so fast I didn't even zip up properly." I told my parents what I saw, but they said I had a bad dream or saw things in the dark. I wasn't asleep. "Trav, when I saw it, I swear." "Did you see it again after that?" I asked. "No, but I kept hearing noises around the RV all night, like snorting and footsteps. Nobody else heard it, though." "You believe my story, right? I'm not making this up, man." I wasn't sure what to think, honestly. On one hand, Elliot wasn't the type to make up stories. He was actually pretty serious for a kid his age, but what he claimed to have seen made no sense. "I believe you saw something scary," I said. "Maybe it was a hunter with some kind of gear on. Maybe a hunter killed a boar nearby and was lifting the head. Who knows?" He shook his head at me, saying it wasn't gear and it wasn't a hunter. He claimed that hunters don't go out in state parks after nightfall. If you're reading this, I have no idea if that's true, so he may have been lying on that part. Before we could talk more, my aunt announced we were stopping for lunch. The conversation moved on from there, but I kept thinking about what Elliot told me. We arrived at Tishomingo State Park in the early afternoon. The place was beautiful with these huge rock formations and the clear water of Bear Creek running through it. It was so amazing seeing water that clear. My uncle parked the RV in a designated spot not far from one of the bathroom buildings, presumably the same spot as last year, judging by Elliot's increasing anxiety. "Come on, boys," he called. "Let's get set up, and then we can go for a hike before dinner." The rest of the afternoon passed normally. We hiked some trails, saw some cool rock formations, and Liam fell in the creek once, had to change clothes. By the time we got back to the RV, my aunt had started cooking dinner on their portable grill. We sat around eating hot dogs and chips. I noticed Elliot kept looking toward the trees that bordered the campsite. The sun was starting to set. Then I tried to imagine what might be hiding in those woods, and I found myself getting a little nervous too. His story was starting to get to me the darker it got. After dinner, my uncle built a campfire and we roasted some marshmallows for dessert. Vanessa told some mild ghost stories, nothing too scary because of Liam. We sang some songs, normal camping stuff. But as it got darker, I started to notice something. At first, it was just the usual sounds from the forest of a state park at night. Branches creaking and rustling leaves. A splash in the water nearby. But then I heard a distinct sound, a snort, like a pig or a boar. The first time I heard it, I looked right over at Elliot, and he'd gone completely still, marshmallow halfway in his mouth. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. He started to rapidly nod. "Probably just a wild pig, boys," my uncle said, poking at the fire. "They're all over these woods. In fact, the woods here are kind of infested with them. Nothing to worry about as long as we don't bother them. And be sure to get inside the moment we spot one." The sound came again. It didn't sound like a normal wild pig, but then again, I was a kid. But to me, there was something off about it, something almost trying to get to us. "I think we should all turn in," my aunt said, standing up and yawning. "It's getting late, and we have a full day tomorrow." Nobody argued with that. Most of us were just tired of getting eaten alive by bugs, I'm sure. We put the fire out properly and headed into the RV. These sleeping arrangements put Elliot and me in the back on the fold-out couch. Phoebe would be on the table-turned bed. Liam was on the smaller couch, and the adults were in the bedroom area. As we settled in, I could tell Elliot was not going to sleep very well, if at all. He was just rigid, staring straight up at the ceiling. "It's going to be okay, dude. Nothing's going to get in this RV, and your dad said it's just wild pigs." "It's not," he said. "It's probably that thing I saw." "The thing you saw?" I asked. "Yeah, the boar man." I didn't know what to say to that. He'd given it a nickname. Part of me wanted to tell him he was being ridiculous, but another part, the part that had heard those noises and was getting scared of the dark, wasn't so sure. Everyone else fell asleep quickly. I tried to sleep too, but between Elliot's anxiety and my own growing unease, it was difficult. The RV was silent except for the soft sounds of people breathing. When I heard a snort, my eyes shot wide open. This time it sounded like it was right outside the RV. In an instant, Elliot's hand grabbed onto my arm, and his fingers dug into me so much it hurt. "It's here," he breathed. "Just a wild pig, Elliot," I told him. But I think I was lying mostly to myself. We lay there still and listened. There was a scraping sound against the side of the RV, like something dragging along it. Then silence again. After a while, I started to relax. Maybe whatever it was had gone away. Then there was a tap at the window just above our heads. Slowly, terrified of what we might see, I turned to look at the window. Elliot did the same. There was a face there through the glass peering in at us. At first, in the dark, I could only make out the figure or outline of it. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw it quite clearly. It had the outline of a man's body, but the head was very much not human. It was longer, with a snout and tusks and small, beady eyes that reflected the faint moonlight. It was watching us, and somehow to me I thought it was smiling. Elliot screamed first, the most terrified I'd ever heard him. I joined in just a second later, unable to control myself, and we both scrambled away from the window, falling off the fold-out couch onto the floor. The RV erupted into chaos then, lights flicking on, Liam starting to scream, Phoebe demanding to know what was going on, and my uncle shouting over everyone. "Calm down, everyone. What's happening?" he said. "There's someone outside," Elliot screamed, pointing at the window. "The boar man! He's right there!" My uncle grabbed a flashlight and rushed to the door, yanking it open, even though my aunt was now telling him not to go out there. He stepped outside, sweeping the area with the flashlight. For a full minute, we were all sitting inside the RV, wondering if he was going to come back alive, and he did. "There's nobody out here," he said. "Just some tracks from a wild boar. Probably what you saw was a shadow on the window." Elliot wasn't having it. "It wasn't a shadow. It was looking at us. It had human eyes." "I saw it too," I said. "It wasn't a normal boar. It had a man's body." My uncle came back inside, looking like he didn't know what to do. "Boys, there's nothing out there now. One of you probably had a nightmare. Woke up screaming and scared the other." "We weren't asleep," Elliot shouted. "Don't talk like that to your dad," my aunt scolded him. Nobody got much sleep after that. Elliot and I were back on the fold-out couch, as far from that window as possible. Every now and then, we heard snorting, and I swear I heard footsteps out there, but nobody went out to check again. Come morning, my uncle found more tracks around the RV. Definitely from a wild boar, he said. But there were also other things. Some marks in the dirt that didn't look like boar tracks. They looked like footprints and handprints of a person. They were too small to be a grown man's, but too big to be a kid's. That was when they decided to cut the trip short. No one said it was because of what Elliot and I had seen, but I knew that was the reason. As we packed up, I caught my aunt looking nervously toward the woods several times. On the drive home, Elliot sat next to me. We were both so exhausted from not sleeping. "Do you believe me now?" he whispered. I said, "Yeah. What do you think it was? Or is?" He shrugged. "Dad says there are old stories about the Choctaw tribes that lived here. Stories about shapeshifters or skinwalkers, but he says those are just stories." I thought about the face at that window. Not animal and not human, but something in between. Maybe those old stories were more than just stories.
Story 2.
My friend Weston and I have been close since sophomore year of high school. We liked terrible metal bands and even worse fashion, but our friendship lasted through college and into our 20s. By the time this story happened, I was 28 years old. I worked at a brewery in Atlanta, and Wes was freelancing in graphic design while also working real jobs, as he called them. That spring was tough for me. My girlfriend of 3 years had moved out in February, leaving me with an apartment I could barely afford, and a kind of emptiness that made me rethink my life. Work wasn't getting better either. My hours were bad, and the customers were terrible. My manager was constantly criticizing me. One day, Wes said he wanted to go on a weekend hiking trip. I agreed right away. It would be a good way to reset. Neither of us was outdoorsy. We grew up in Marietta, where nature meant the strip of trees between neighborhoods. But that's why it sounded fun. We'd go somewhere completely different, where our phones wouldn't work. No reminders of my ex or people complaining about craft beer. We decided on Black Rock Mountain State Park. It was only a 2-hour drive, and the views were supposed to be great. We packed our cars with whatever camping gear we could afford and left early on Saturday morning. The main trails were decent, moderate difficulty and well marked. But by mid-afternoon, Wes was bored with the tourist trails. "Check out this game trail," he said, pointing to a barely visible path into the forest. "Want to see where it goes?" I should have said no, but the whole point was to do something new, right? After about 15 minutes of pushing through the brush and climbing over fallen trees, we came across an old fire tower. It looked like it was built in the 60s or 70s, and it stood about 40 feet tall, a mix of metal and wood, leaning slightly to one side. It practically screamed, "Don't climb me." There was even a faded sign warning us to stay away. "This is perfect," Wes said. "We have to camp here tonight." "Is that safe?" I asked. "Probably not, but imagine the sunrise view," he said, grinning. "And I haven't seen anyone post this on Instagram yet. It's authentic." It took us about 20 minutes to climb up the switchback stairs, testing each step before putting our full weight on it. The whole tower swayed slightly in the wind. At the top was an observation platform, about 8 feet square, with a small cabin that was missing its door and half its windows. We set up our sleeping bags on the open platform instead of in the cabin, which was full of beer cans and graffiti. Clearly, we weren't the first to ignore the warning sign. But Wes was right. The view was incredible. The mountains stretched out for miles, covered in blue and green. We cracked open a bottle of whiskey and talked about life as the sun set. Nothing important, just easy conversation. It felt good to be away from everything. Then we got into a conversation I do remember. "You know, there are stories about this tower," Wes said. I asked what kind of stories. "Ghost stories," he said. "Some guy from the park killed himself up here in the 70s, and there's a story about a little girl who got lost in the woods and died out here. It changes depending on who you hear it from." "Yeah, there's always ghost stories about places like this," I said. "Yeah, it's probably all crap," he replied, taking a swig of whiskey. "But hey, if we get murdered by ghosts tonight, at least we'll die with a good view." By midnight, we were both drunk and exhausted from the hike. We crawled into our sleeping bags under a sky full of stars. The tower creaked a little in the wind, but it was kind of peaceful. I woke up suddenly sometime later, no idea what time it was, and instantly I felt like I was being watched. When I opened my eyes, I almost peed myself. There was a little girl standing over me, maybe only 3 feet away. She looked to be about 6 years old and wore an old-fashioned dress with a pattern I couldn't make out in the dark. Her hair was wet and clinging to her pale face in clumps. She was just staring at me. No movement, no sound. I blinked hard and told myself, I'm either dreaming or I'm drunk. When I opened my eyes again, she was gone. My heart was pounding, but I convinced myself it was a nightmare, mixed with too much drinking. I rolled over and went back to sleep. The second time I woke up, it was much worse. She was sitting on my chest, her face inches from mine. Her skin felt cold as ice. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, and completely dead. No shine, no moisture. Water dripped from her hair onto my sleeping bag and face. Now, I could see her dress clearly, a faded blue with small flowers, the kind no kid would wear anymore. I gasped, and she was gone. Just like that, I sat up, panting, and fumbled for my phone. It said 3 a.m. The temperature had dropped, and I could see my breath. Wes, dude, I whispered. Wes, wake up. He didn't move. I shook him hard, but he just mumbled something and rolled away. It was like he was impossible to wake up. I started to think maybe the whiskey was to blame. When I looked around, things had moved. My backpack, which I had left near the stairs, was now in the middle of the room, and all my stuff had been pulled out and scattered, like someone had gone through it. Wes's camera was moved from inside the cabin to the edge of the platform. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps, like a child's, accompanied by a quiet humming. It wasn't a tune, just random notes that made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, but I didn't see anything. As I turned it off, I saw her in the corner of my vision, standing in the cabin doorway. When I turned to look directly, she was gone. This happened 3 more times. She would appear in my peripheral vision, but when I looked, she vanished, silent, always staring. I saw wet footprints too, small ones, circling around our sleeping bags. Sometimes they stopped right by my head or Wes's feet. By now I was so scared I was sitting up, my back against the railing with a knife in my hand. But honestly, I wasn't sure how useful it would be. This little girl didn't seem like a normal child. The temperature kept dropping until it felt like winter. Around 4 a.m. I saw her again, standing at the foot of our sleeping bags. There was a puddle of water around her feet, and her dress was soaked. She stared at me with those dead eyes, then slowly raised her arm and pointed down through the platform. I didn't move. She kept pointing, but still made no sound. Then she tilted her head at an impossible angle, nearly sideways on her shoulders. Her expression never changed. What happened next shattered me. She dropped to all fours and crawled toward us. Her joints bent wrong and her head twisted at a disturbing angle. She moved like she was trying to copy human movement but couldn't get it right. She made it to the edge of the sleeping bag, then, impossibly, started crawling up the cabin wall. That's when Wes woke up. He sat up, disoriented, and mumbled, "What the heck, man?" Then he saw where I was staring. The girl was now on the ceiling, looking down at us. Her wet hair hung toward the floor, defying gravity. She opened her mouth wide, impossibly wide, but no sound came out. I screamed, "Run, Wes!" I was already scrambling for the stairs. We left most of our gear behind, taking just our phones and car keys. The stairs felt endless, but I think I'd rather fall than stay there any longer. We spent the rest of the night hiking back, getting lost several times and jumping at every noise. By dawn, we finally made it to the car. We laughed like crazy people, only to realize after about 20 minutes that we were safe. Maybe you'll hear this story and think it was just drunken nightmares or hallucinations. And you might be right. Maybe we drank too much. Maybe the cold messed with our heads. But tell me this. How do 2 different guys, waking at different times, hallucinate the exact same thing? In the exact same spot? How does that happen? I'm pretty sure we saw a ghost girl in that fire watch tower. If you ever find an abandoned fire tower in Black Rock Mountain State Park, leave it alone or prepare for the night of your life.
Story 3.
Skinwalker at Navajo State Park. From Anonymous. My Aunt Dell is one of the best people in my life. She always makes sure I'm okay. When my dog passed away not long ago, she insisted on taking a trip with me to Navajo State Park to, as she said, reconnect with the land and with myself. I know a lot of people might think that I didn't need to reconnect just because I lost a dog. But a dog is called man's best friend for a reason. My dog Jasper was everything to me. He had been for almost 13 years. The poor guy died of old age, and I had always been afraid of that day. But it came. Aunt Dell suggested a camping trip, and even though I didn't feel like it, I went because I love her. When we met up at the park entrance, she was already waiting in her old Subaru. That car had seen better days. At 60 years old, Dell still moved like someone 20 years younger, probably because of all those years working as a nurse. Her hair was silver and tied in a practical braid. She gave me that smile that always made me feel like a kid again. "Glad you made it," she said. She hugged me, and she smelled like cedar and sage, which was normal for her. She loved the old ways, as she called it. It was late September, and the evenings were getting chilly, but it was still nice during the day. Dell drove us past the usual camping spots where families were setting up their tents and RVs. We kept going down narrow dirt roads until the crowds were gone. "So where are we going exactly?" I asked. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere special," she replied. I didn't ask more. Dell had been coming here all her life, and our family on my dad's side had deep roots in the area. I had always been more of a city guy myself. I had an apartment in Denver and an office job, but Dell stayed connected to the land. We hiked the last half mile to reach our campsite, which overlooked a narrow part of the reservoir surrounded by pine and juniper trees with a large rock formation blocking the wind. As we set up camp, I noticed Dell doing her thing, placing small bundles of sage and cedar around the campsite. I had seen her do this before on the few camping trips we took when I was younger. She kept the bad spirits away, she'd say. I teased her about it, and she smiled, saying, "Some habits are worth keeping." I helped gather firewood while Dell unpacked our food. It felt good to be outside, away from my empty apartment where Jasper's bed still sat in the corner because I couldn't bring myself to move it yet. I was about 30 yards from camp, carrying branches, when I noticed something strange. I saw a coyote standing still between two pine trees. I had seen coyotes before, but this one was different. Its eyes were wrong, almost like a person's. I did what you're supposed to do with wildlife. I made myself look bigger, standing on my toes and raising my load of branches above my head while shouting. The coyote didn't move at all except for tilting its head like it was curious. I threw a stick at it, not to hit it but to scare it off. The coyote then opened its mouth in a way that looked more like a smile. It turned and walked away with a stiff, unnatural walk, disappearing into the trees. I hurried back to camp, dropping some sticks as I ran. I wondered if that coyote had some disease. Dell saw my face and immediately tensed up. "What happened?" she asked. I told her about the coyote, how it wouldn't leave no matter what I did. Dell's mood shifted. Without a word, she grabbed a small pouch from her backpack and walked to the edge of our campsite. She sprinkled what looked like cornmeal in a line on the ground. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just precautions," she replied. "My grandmother taught me this. Your dad knew about these things too." Her tone stopped me from asking more. We finished setting up camp mostly in silence as the sun sank behind the mountains. Eventually I asked her, "Are you going to tell me what you think is going on, like with the cornmeal and the coyote?" Dell stared into the fire. "This place is special to our family, but it requires respect." I asked what she meant. "The border between the reservation and the park is just a line on a map. The land doesn't know those boundaries, neither do the things that live here." "Like what?" "Like things we should not disturb. Stay close tonight, no matter what you hear or see." We then talked about safer subjects, my job, her garden, family gossip. But I noticed Dell glancing toward the trees, and I couldn't tell if she was worried, serious, or afraid. It was just after midnight when I felt that strange sensation again, like I was being watched. Dell was in the middle of telling me about my cousin's new baby when she suddenly stopped. "Shh, do you hear that?" she whispered. I didn't hear anything at first, then I caught it. Soft footsteps circling our campsite. They were too rhythmic for an animal and too light for a person. "Someone's out there," I said, reaching for my phone to turn on the light. Dell grabbed my wrist. "No," she whispered. "Not someone. Remember what I said. Stay close and don't answer if it calls you." Before I could ask what she meant, a voice came from the darkness beyond the fire. "Imani, is that you?" It sounded like my voice, or at least a horrible copy of it. It even had my slight Denver accent, the way I pronounced certain words. Dell quickly covered my mouth. "Don't respond," she hissed. "It's not real." The footsteps circled again. Our fire was dimming. There was no wind or rain, but the voice came again, this time with panic. "I need help. I'm lost." I watched as Dell pulled out gray powder from her pocket, cedar ash, and reinforced the perimeter she had created. "It's just tricks," she said quietly. The voice called again.
"Imani girl, where are you this time?"
This time it sounded like my father's voice, but my dad had been gone for over a decade. Tears came to my eyes. "How's it doing that?" I asked. "It learns," Dell said. "It listens and it learns. That's what it does." Then something moved at the edge of the firelight. A figure shaped like a human, but wrong. It wore what looked like a coyote skin draped over its shoulders, the animal's head forming a hood that obscured its face. "I miss you so much," it said, but its mouth didn't move. Dell began chanting quietly in a language I remembered from childhood, though I couldn't understand it. She gripped my hand tightly. The figure took a step forward but stopped at the line of ash. It tilted its head at an impossible angle. "You know who I am," it said, its voice shifting between my father's and something older and raspier. "You belong here with me." "No," Dell said firmly. "She doesn't. Neither did her father." The thing hissed, a sound no human could make. The coyote skin seemed to ripple. "Come to me, Imani," it said in a voice now a mix of my father's and my own. I couldn't look away from it. There was something magnetic about it, terrifying but pulling me in. "Don't look in its eyes," Dell warned, squeezing my hand. It circled the camp, sometimes silent, sometimes calling in voices it shouldn't know, my boss's, my mother's, and even Jasper's bark. By dawn, when the stars started fading, I think it got desperate. Its mimicry became broken, sentences starting in one voice and ending in another. Eventually, the coyote skin seemed to merge with whatever was beneath it, shifting between human and animal. "You will come," it said, "just like your father almost did. Your dog did. You will too." And then it was gone, vanishing into the dark. We didn't speak until the sun fully came up. Dell closed our campsite with prayers and offerings. I couldn't stop shaking as we packed up. "That's why we came here, isn't it?" I asked. "You wanted me to see it." Dell looked exhausted. "Your father encountered it when he was your age. It marked him somehow. When Jasper died and you started having those dreams, I knew it was coming for you too." "What is it?" I asked. "It's something that wants what it can't have. Our form, our voices, and our lives. It helps to see it for what it truly is. Names have power, so we don't speak its name here." At the ranger station, when we checked out, the ranger casually asked if we'd heard any coyotes. "No," Dell said calmly, "all quiet." On the drive back to Denver, I asked Dell to teach me the prayers and protections she had used. For the first time in years, I felt a connection to the traditions I had dismissed growing up. "Some knowledge stays in the blood," Dell said, "even when we try to forget it." That night in my apartment, I smudged every room with the sage Dell had given me. I hung a small pouch of protective herbs by my bed. And when I heard something scratching at my window just before dawn, something that whined with a voice like Jasper's, I spoke the words Dell had taught me. I didn't look outside until after the sun rose. I think the lesson she wanted me to learn was that once you see certain things, they never stop watching you back.
Story 4.
Never thought I'd be the type to tell folks about a Bigfoot sighting. I spent years working in forestry in California, and I always figured those stories were just for scaring kids or selling souvenirs. You can call me Howie, and I've been retired for about 5 years now. I've seen enough real dangers in the woods that I don't need to make up fake ones. This happened one fall during my annual camping trip with my buddy Vern. We've been doing these trips since our kids were small, and we needed a break from diapers and daycare. Now we're both widowers. My wife Elaine passed away in 2005, and his wife went in 2012. These trips mean even more now. Vern was a history teacher before he retired, smart as they come, but with no filter whatsoever. He's about 10 years older than me, and never lets me forget it when his memory works better than mine, which is too often. When we pulled into the parking area at the trailhead, Vern asked if this was the spot my grandson had mentioned. I looked at the sign nearby and told him, "That's what Ryan said. Claims it's great for fishing and nobody knows about it." "Huh. Probably a reason nobody knows about it," Vern said, but he was grinning. For a guy with a bad hip, he was already pulling his pack from the truck. The hike in wasn't bad, about 1.5 miles on a trail that got narrower as we went. We found a decent clearing about 50 yards from a small stream, a perfect spot for the old tent we'd been using since George W. Bush was president, the first one. Vern said it wasn't too bad, even complimenting my grandson for once, according to him. I laughed at that. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. We set up camp and fished before it got dark. We caught 3 good-sized trout that afternoon, plenty for dinner, but nothing special. We cooked them with some potatoes and cracked open a couple of beers. This was something we'd done 100 times before. "Ah, my bones say rain tomorrow," Vern said. "Your bones always say rain. Sometimes they're even right about it," I joked. We laughed, turned in for the night, and that's when I noticed something strange. How quiet the forest was. Normally in a place like this, you get frogs, bugs, owls, lots of night sounds, but not tonight. I whispered to Vern, asking if he heard anything, and he mumbled that he didn't. "Exactly," I said, but we were tired, and after a few minutes of silence, we both drifted off to sleep. The next morning, there was a light drizzle, just enough to make everything damp. I woke up first, as usual, and went to get our food bag from where we hung it between 2 trees, and then I saw it. Footprints. Big ones, around our campsite. "Vern, come take a look at this," I called. He hobbled over, still zipping up his jacket. "What is that, bear tracks?" "That's what I thought at first," I said, "but take a closer look." The prints were huge, easily 18 inches long, but they weren't bear tracks. The shape didn't match up. They had 5 toes, and they were arched like human feet, only twice the size of my boot. "Huh," Vern said, which meant he was stumped. He figured someone was playing a trick on us, but I reminded him that we were way out in the wilderness in October, on a weekday. Not the best time for someone to be pranking a couple of old guys. Our food bag had been messed with too, unhooked from the rope but not torn open. It didn't look like a bear's doing either. "Ryan didn't say anything about hoodlums out here, did he?" Vern asked as we made coffee. "No, just said it was quiet and good fishing," I answered. We spent the morning fishing again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there with us. Around noon, the feeling grew stronger, and I suggested we head back to camp. "Your arthritis acting up?" Vern teased. "No, just, I don't know. I think it'd be best if we head back." We were about halfway back to camp when I saw something. Between 2 giant redwoods, about 30 yards away, stood something. I wanted to tell myself it was a weird shadow, maybe a burned trunk, but then I saw it move. "Hey, Vern, look between those 2 big trees." He squinted. "What is that? A person?" It wasn't a person. It was too big, too broad. It stood about 8 feet tall, if I had to guess. We stared at it for maybe 10 seconds before it turned and walked off into the thick forest. "Definitely wasn't a bear," Vern said. "Nope, sure wasn't." When we got back to camp, we found branches broken about 10 feet up on a tree, snapped downward like something big had pushed past them. Nearby, we found a pile of rocks stacked up. We hadn't left them like that. There were 3 bigger rocks at the bottom, 2 in the middle, and 1 on top. "Could be other hikers," I guessed. "Hikers that are 8 feet tall?" Vern shook his head. "You know what the loggers used to talk about in these parts." "Oh, don't start with that nonsense." "I'm just saying. My dad worked these forests in the 50s. Said the old-timers wouldn't go into certain places alone. Said there were forest men watching them." I rolled my eyes. "Your dad also said he once caught a fish so big he needed a crane to land it." Vern laughed. "True enough, but I'm just saying. There are stories about these woods going back before European settlement." That night, things got stranger. We were playing cards in the tent when we heard it. Rhythmic knocking, like someone hitting wood against wood. First from one direction, then answered from another. "Oh God, please tell me that's a woodpecker with insomnia," I said. "An October after dark?" Vern replied. The knocking continued for about 20 minutes, then stopped. After that, something worse. A deep rumbling vocalization came from somewhere in the darkness beyond camp. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. "What kind of animal makes that noise?" Vern asked. "Darn if I know. Mountain lion with laryngitis?" We tried to keep it light, but we both knew this wasn't normal. That's when small rocks, pebbles mostly, started landing on the tent, like they were being tossed from somewhere in the dark. "I'm too old for this crap," I muttered, but neither of us suggested packing up yet. We'd never hear the end of it from each other if we ran scared in the middle of the night. The strangest part was the smell that drifted through camp. It was like a skunk mixed with wet dog and thrown in a blender, so musky and overpowering. I didn't recognize it, and I've spent years in the woods. We finally fell asleep around midnight when things quieted down, but at nearly 3 a.m., both of us sat bolt upright as something brushed against the side of the tent. Something big. The fabric pushed inward, outlining what looked like a massive hand or paw. Then the whole side bulged, as if something was leaning against it. We could hear heavy breathing that didn't sound human. "Get the flashlight," Vern whispered. I fumbled for it and clicked it on. Whatever was outside our tent then moved away quickly. We could hear big footsteps retreating. "I'm taking a look," Vern said, already unzipping the tent despite his bad hip. "Are you crazy?" "Maybe, but I'm not sleeping another wink wondering what's out there." I followed him out with the light. It was misty, but the moon gave us enough light to see the clearing around the tent. At first, we didn't see anything until Vern grabbed my arm and pointed. At the forest's edge, partially hidden by a redwood trunk, stood a figure. It was enormous, well over 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a heavy brow. It was covered in dark hair or fur, just standing there watching us. "Holy Mother of..." Vern whispered. The thing stood there for nearly a minute without moving or making a sound, then turned and walked off into the forest. We heard branches breaking as it moved away, followed by similar sounds from another direction. We realized there may have been more of them out there, all moving around together. We stayed up until dawn, sitting back to back in the tent with our flashlights and Vern's old fishing knife. We didn't talk much, but when we did, it was about practical things. "You ever hear anything like this when you were working forestry?" Vern asked. "Nothing but rumors." "Really?" Guys would come back from remote areas talking about weird stuff, tracks and sounds. Most of us figured they were drinking or pulling our legs. "You think anyone's going to believe this?" I snorted. "Would you? 2 old farts claiming they saw Bigfoot." "I didn't say anything about Bigfoot," Vern said, but I could hear the smile in his voice. At first light, we checked around the camp. The ground was damp enough to hold some impressions, and there they were, big footprints in a semicircle around our tent, just like the day before. Different sizes, suggesting at least 3 different creatures, whatever they were. We also found more of those rock piles, and small structures made of sticks. None of it looked random. There were tufts of dark, coarse hair caught on tree bark about 10 feet up in places too. We packed up quickly, not saying much. By unspoken agreement, we left the remaining fish on a flat rock at the edge of camp. It feels stupid now, but at the time, it felt like the right thing to do. The hike back felt like it took ages. We didn't see anything else, but the feeling of being watched stayed with us until we made it back to the truck. On the drive home, Vern broke the silence. "So where are we going next year?" I looked at him, surprised. "Already planning the next trip after that?" "Heck yeah," he said. "I've got at least a few more trips in me before I kick it, but maybe somewhere with fewer locals." I laughed at him. "Crater Lake, maybe? I hear they've got good fishing, too." "Sounds perfect. Just old guys and normal-sized wildlife?"
Story 5.
God's decree? L'Oreal knew what it was like to live outside of God's grace. She was hollow inside a nothing shell of a being. She was beautiful as were all of God's creatures, but the grand cosmic joke was that all beauty wasn't created equal. She was ebony as a pool of liquid chocolate and as exotic as the most rare and delicate bird of paradise. She was the form that all women aspired to be. She started her fall from up high and planned to breach the first layer of hell if she had the conviction to do so. Her wings would more than likely burn in the fire, but it was the price you paid when you went where her kind feared to tread. The air rippled and her billowing white wings were consumed in the heat of unholy fire. She no longer flew, but fell. The impact on the burning volcanic rock was seismic. The shock wave sent sound all throughout the land, all but announcing the presence of that which was unwelcomed. L'Oreal surveyed her surroundings cautiously. Her wings burned black from fire and still smoldered. The place was devoid of sky and color and hope. It wafted in brimstone, and each step on the blackened rock felt like that of the bones of lost souls. God drew his power from devotion, so if she believed, he would be stronger, thus making her stronger. All manner of the damned skittered out of sight, frightened by the light of the righteous, but eager and predatory, as if looking for cracks in her shield of faith. Little creatures that had never known a mother's love peeked from behind dead trees and scorched rocks. L'Oreal was close to 6 feet, so that made these beasts nearer to 2. Their eyes were big and unfocused. Their teeth were jagged and many. Some of their legs were so weak they had to crawl rather than stand, while others had extra limbs that did not follow the blueprints of God's design. L'Oreal reached for her sword, not with an expert's precision, but with the desperation of a novice. The beast sensed L'Oreal's uncertainty, which bolstered their resolve, making her meat all the more tender. They attacked. They came slowly at first. They tested their boundaries, inching closer, then retreating. The beasts in the back surged forward while the ones in front snuck in closer. With each passing second, the numbers of the tiny creatures seemed to multiply. L'Oreal wasn't without skill in the blade, but she certainly lacked the confidence of a master. The mobs swarmed like piranhas in the midst of a feeding frenzy. L'Oreal slew whatever came within the arc of her swing. The beasts nipped at her with their sharp little teeth. She knocked them away when they threatened to pull her down. Her blackened wings fluttered. Her instincts to take to the air were ingrained. The drab sky opened up. Red rips tore at the face of the sky as a mockery to lightning. Instead of thunder, there was only a loud hissing followed by seismic booms. L'Oreal saw a crater of fire land close to her person. The resulting fireball decimated the mob of beasts that rushed her down. She felt a sharp sting on her shoulder, then another, then another. Her flesh hissed from droplets of fire. The beast scattered when the roar of erupting flames came down. L'Oreal rose her arms and what was left of her tattered wings. She ran aimlessly away, hoping to find shelter from the onslaught of liquid burning. Trees wavered in an orange haze. The unfinished beasts melted. Some managed to skitter under rocks. Others dug themselves under the loose dirt they could find. L'Oreal didn't have that option. "Father, protect me," she mumbled through the roaring fire. An overhang of a heavy stone lay ahead of her. Had he forgiven her, or was this merely the same luck granted to children and fools? When L'Oreal approached the overhanging stone, she slipped, and instead of falling under the huge rock, she tumbled into a cavern whose entrance was so minuscule she couldn't see it. When L'Oreal stopped her descent down the rocky incline, she found herself in darkness, with only the light of the fire through the small hole to guide her. She could sense the presence of the unclean, the unloved, the unwanted. She saw them in flashes, skipping from shadow to shadow. She brandished her sword from its sheath, and it shone with a dim glimmer of holy light. L'Oreal noticed something in silhouette. The shape of a man clung to the darkness. "Who goes there?" she said to the wretched thing. "Why do you want to know?" it said in an ominous and even voice. L'Oreal thought for a moment. She supposed she didn't want to know. It was merely something to say because she felt she should. "Don't get many of you down here," it said while blocking the dim light of the sword with its hand. L'Oreal lowered her blade but did not sheath it. "I wouldn't assume so," she said cautiously. "May I ask why you're here?" said the shade. "No," L'Oreal snapped back. "Why would you want to know?" Unlike L'Oreal, the thing that cleaved to the dark was more in tune with his emotions and answered, "Because I have nothing but time, and you are the first new thing I have seen in I don't know how many years." "I shouldn't even be talking to you," L'Oreal said. "Usually they don't. You're different, though, not as battle-hardened, soulless. You're just a messenger, aren't you?" inquired the man-thing. L'Oreal didn't want to answer because it would make her look more vulnerable than she was, and more prone to be attacked. "Maybe I can help you." "Whatever it is," said the man. "Why would you want to do that?" "So that I can redeem myself in the eyes of the Lord. I don't know any other way." L'Oreal thought about that statement and was mildly perplexed. "You're damned. You cannot be redeemed. You and I both know that God works in absolutes the same as the weather changes." L'Oreal agreed, but she didn't tip her hand and show it. "How can you help me?" asked L'Oreal. "I have absolutely no clue until you give me an idea why you're here," said the voice. L'Oreal thought again, this time longer and harder. What did it matter if he knew? What could it change? "I've come for a baby," said L'Oreal. "A baby? An unbaptized baby, I suppose. I thought you said God won't redeem the damned. Souls like that only go down, not up. But you must know that." "What do you know that I don't know?" L'Oreal didn't answer, and the shade didn't press the issue. Fine. You need a name, and you need to get to the All-Mother. Unless it was down here for long. In that case, any one of those little critters you tangled with could have been yours. The All-Mother baptizes them in hell. L'Oreal put up her hand, knowing that part of the story, and not needing to be saddened any farther by it. I have to believe I've gotten here in time. And if you haven't? L'Oreal didn't answer. The creature in the darkness pointed to L'Oreal's back and saw that her wings were healing slowly, regaining some of its former vigor. If you get your wings back, could you fly us out of here? L'Oreal nodded, but agreed to nothing. I'm Leo, by the way. Who am I speaking to? L'Oreal, L'Oreal said. Nice name. If I were to help you, could you get me out of here? Asked Leo. L'Oreal had absolutely no clue, but she smiled, letting him decide what it meant. Leo, being so starved for hope, let that gesture nourish him. In ideal circumstances, she would not have thrown in with a damned soul, but time was a fleeting commodity. Leo happily stepped out of the shadows and presented himself in the sword's dim light. He was rotted through in parts. Coral grew from holes in his tattered clothes. His face was bloated and waterlogged as if touched by old death. Come on, I know the way. Maybe it's not too late. L'Oreal and Leo walked amongst the desolate landscape. Broken monuments of things built long ago, consumed by time, lay scattered like corpses in the sun. Leo limped slightly ahead of L'Oreal. His knees creaked like rotted wood. If you approach her straight on, I don't think you'd have a chance. No offense. You being a messenger, not an angel of death or destruction is all. L'Oreal didn't deny that she was ill-suited for the task at hand, but it was none of his concern. They approached a rising plateau which overlooked a spire of bones draped in webs. You sure? Looks like your wings are nearly back. You don't have to do this, said Leo. I do, but thank you, Leo. When I speak to the Lord again, I will inform him of your kindness. I can go in with you, get you out. I can't kill the witch, but I might just be able to hurt her. Leo produced 2 rusted flintlock pistols that were so waterlogged it didn't seem likely it could fire. You've done enough, thank you, Leo, L'Oreal said once again. Leo put his pistols away and sat on the ridge. If you do manage to snag the child, you can pull me out, right? Leo asked with some measure of brightness in his glazed-over eyes. L'Oreal smiled again, not wanting to say, not knowing if she should or could. The winged messenger approached the spire with caution. Inside of the webs of this ghastly place were little lumps in cocoons. She stayed out of sight as best as she could. Little undefined monstrosities navigated the webs. She did a small, precise incision on one of the cocoons just to confirm what she already knew. Inside were human infants in various stages of life, some fully formed while others more potential than child. Looking at the thousands upon thousands of cocooned lumps, she wondered how she would even find the infant she sought. She didn't think about the how just yet, because she knew she had to leave with it. Nothing else mattered to her. Her course was righteous, regardless of her situation. If she slew the All-Mother, perhaps she would find enough time to save the child she sought, and several others. She ventured farther into the heart of darkness, into the tower itself. When she entered, the thing spiraled up with no concern for logic. There were stairs, mostly covered in white web. Tables, chairs, and shelves were enveloped in white. Whatever this place was once, it was no more. She looked up and had a vertigo effect pull on her senses. A slow and melodic voice sang out on the air, vibrating the white web. L'Oreal hid behind a broken table and looked up. The shadow of the beast was visible far before it was. The multiple legs of a fantastically huge spider walked a tightrope of the sticky white strands. Its back hump was engorged with squiggling, unholy life. The top half of its body was more a mockery of the female form than anything else. Its breasts were bare, and its stomach was bulbous, obviously pregnant. Time to be born, my precious creations, said the All-Mother. Her spider back half opened, and mockeries of human children skittered out of her like insects. She sang a pleasant melody and loomed over a lump cocooned several feet over L'Oreal's head. The messenger slowly moved position and crept up the stairs to get behind her. If she could rise above her, she could drop down and surprise her. That was her thinking, until her foot nudged a single innocuous strand of web. The All-Mother stopped her singing and placed the cocoon back in the web. I feel you. Best you come out, lest I make your stay here even more unpleasant. L'Oreal wasn't quite set up, but she was at least in an elevated position. She dove. Her wings glid well enough to carry her down, if not up. The All-Mother's elongated neck twisted in anticipation, not fear. L'Oreal rose her sword to smite what was wicked. Suddenly the determined messenger was suspended in place, her forward momentum completely arrested. Her foot caught on a strand of webbing. She dangled helplessly. The more she struggled, the more webs entangled her. "L'Oreal, is that you?" said the All-Mother. L'Oreal looked at the beast in confusion. "It is I. I was once Danielle," said the ghastly creature. "You may not have recognized me without my wings," she said with a chuckle. "Why would God send you? Why would a messenger come to kill me?" L'Oreal remained quiet, dreading the idea of ending up like her fallen sister. "No, not to kill me. You came to find a soul, didn't you?" The All-Mother scampered up her web to retrieve a cocoon. L'Oreal used that time to cut as many strands as she could, though it wasn't enough. The spider lowered itself to her level from a spinneret and was nearly eye to eye to eye to eye. "You came for this, didn't you? This child. I can smell it. I can feel it," said the All-Mother, sniffing the cocoon. L'Oreal stayed silent. The All-Mother opened her distended mouth as if to swallow the child whole. "No, no." "I did come for her," L'Oreal admitted. "Why? By God's decree?" she asked. L'Oreal tightened as if she didn't want to answer, but the All-Mother opened her mouth once again. "No, I came for the child." "On your own? You defied God to retrieve a soul you knew was damned?" The All-Mother sniffed L'Oreal, then the baby. Her many eyes opened with surprise. "It's your baby, isn't it?" L'Oreal looked down in shame. "Truly a miracle. Impossible for you to still be an angel and have a spawn, but you did." "It was a child conceived in love," L'Oreal said with conviction. "Conceived? Angels can't conceive. Gender is an abstraction without love," the All-Mother replied. The All-Mother paused as if unraveling pieces of a grander mystery. "You lost the baby before it came to term, didn't you? You know you can't. You could never change its fate, and you defied God twice. What makes you think you will not be ejected from his kingdom the moment you return?" L'Oreal's tears traveled up her forehead from her dangling inverted position. "Because God's word is as absolute as the weather," said L'Oreal. Gunshots happened. The All-Mother was struck and reeled back. L'Oreal snatched the cocoon from the beast the moment her eyes were affixed on her attacker. The spider hopped from her web to a lowered elevation. "Over here, you damned beast," said Leo, quickly reloading his flintlock. The All-Mother flung the table at the wretched damned soul. Her body boomed when it touched ground. Come on, you thick-bottomed hussy," Leo yelled while diving to the floor. "If you think your eternity was awful before, I can assure you I can make it much worse," said the All-Mother, who bounced on 4 back legs to pounce her prey. Leo fired a flintlock, but it barely managed to slow her down. "Come on, you she-bitch," Leo said defiantly. Leo's eyes veered up ever so slightly. The All-Mother roared in anger. She looked up to see L'Oreal flying out and up from the dark spire, cocoon under arm. Leo smiled, knowing for once in his life he had done the right thing regardless of the hell he'd have to pay for it in return. L'Oreal struggled to exit the fiery depths of hell. Pieces of her ripped away. Her flight became more a test of will than of physical prowess. The grip of hell was tight, but on burning wings she pushed through its depths. She exploded through its unholy maw and was spat out to earth. She landed on a rock face overlooking a mountain staring at God's creation where heaven met earth. Then she tore away the webbing from the baby's face. She owed it life. It was the promise she had made it when her womb brought it into being. Then she looked to the sky as if to ask God, was he so cruel as to deny it that...
Story 6.
Things change. The 3rd anniversary of my disappearance was marked with a bottle of cheap bourbon and the kind of humid New Orleans night that sticks to your skin like bad memories. I sat in my cramped office on Chartres Street. The unopened letter stared at me. Charles C. Cooper. I used to know a Charles C. Cooper, but now I was Charlie Culp, the pulp edition of that good guy, Mr. Cooper. 3 years ago, I left Maria without a word. I told myself I was protecting her from the fallout, from the exposure, from the destruction in the wake of my sins. Nowadays, I admitted the truth. I ran because I found out who she was, and it scared me. Maria grew up in a world of secrets. too comfortable with the likes of the DaCosta family. None of their casual cruelties bothered her. Deep down, some of it excited her. She told you where to find the silverware, and in the same breath hinted at a favor she'd done for her father that made my blood turn cold. We were the same in protecting family. We just did it too differently to work together. Gil, fellow private detective, sauntered into our office. "Oh ho, bourbon," he said. "What's the occasion? Thought you were more of half-glass of white wine guy." "No occasion," I said. "Just thinking of taking up a new hobby." Gil, a more celebrated drinker than I, pulled his own bottle of booze out of a paper bag. He picked up an envelope off the desk to make room for the bottle. He saw it was addressed to me and tossed it at me. I caught it. The letter felt heavier now. My hand trembled as I pulled the letter from the torn envelope for the 100th time. The final lines gave the letter profound weight by a name that for the last 3 years I never spoke, never heard, never saw, but feared every day that I would. "Dear Mr. Cooper, meet me at the Canal Street warehouse tonight. Midnight. Much respect. Don DaCosta." The first thing I noticed about the warehouse on Canal Street was the smell. Salt water, oil, and something else that clung to the air. The smell was pungent and metallic like filthy blood. "Hey, Charlie," said a voice somewhere between a whisper and a growl. "Long time." Maria stood next to a black sedan, her hair swept back in a way that made her look impossibly young. Her hand rested on the shoulder of the man beside her. "Tony DaCosta." It had been 3 years since I'd seen him, but the grin hadn't changed. Sleazy, but sophisticated, the kind of smile that made you double-check your wallet. "Charlie," he said, drawing out the syllables as he sauntered toward me. "Or do you still go by Mr. Cooper?" Hard to keep track. Maria silently stared at me with her violent eyes, unsure if Tony would beat me to death, or if she would get the chance to rip my throat out herself. Tony detached himself from Maria and walked over to me, clapping a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm enough to make my knees lock. "We'll get to her in a minute," he said, nodding. "But first we need to talk. You know, clear the air. You've been breathing all this swamp air for too long. It's not good for your, well-being." A memory pushed its way to the surface. Tony, 5 years ago. The Trans Am. Someone keyed it while we were in the bar. "The 2 kids crossing the street must have done it," he said. The way he slammed that boy's face into the car door again and again, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. "Can you believe that shit?" he said after it was over. "Damn. Justice feels good." He wiped the blood on his knuckles off on his shirt. "Best part is, no way them kids call the cops. They're scared silent. We get a free pass." "Justice. I knew justice. It wasn't that." Tony's grin widened. "Don't look so nervous. Charlie, I didn't bring you here to kill you. Not yet. Anyway." A small man rolled around from behind the car, confined to a wheelchair, operated by a withered hand. "You remember Dominic, right, Charlie?" "My God," I said. "Dom?" "That's right. Your former client, Mr. Big-Time Defense Attorney. You remember? He had that little court case that didn't go so good for Dom." "Tony, there was nothing." "Do I look like a moron, Charlie? Do I? You threw the game. I know it, Dom knows it, even Maria probably knows it," Tony shouted, flecks of spit dousing my face. "Of course, who knows if that dumb whore knows anything? Daughter of a 2-bit hitman." "Shut your mouth, Tony," Maria said. "I know enough to know you're a coward. Either do your thing or don't." "I got other ways of torturing my dear husband." Tony's lip curled into a fiendish smile. "So do I," he said. "So do I." Maria's muffled screams bounced off the cement walls, each one cutting through me like a blade. She was tied to a chair in the corner, her hands bound behind her back with a chain. Another tied her ankles together. The harsh overhead light made the chain links sparkle brilliantly. The links that weren't covered in blood, anyway. Tony punched her again, in the face this time. Maria shed no tears, only fury. It rose her gorgeous pale skin like a heat haze off a Brooklyn sidewalk in July. It was becoming harder to tell who she hated more, him or me. But even in her rage, she was even more beautiful than I remembered. My perfect angel. She spat, and a tooth flew out. It made small click when it hit the ground. "I'm going to be wanting that bag, Tony. Wrap it up for me," she said. "I don't want to get your blood on it when I tear you to shreds." "Whoa," Tony said. "You hear that, Charlie? Your kitty got claws." "And teeth," Maria said. "And probably more between my teeth than you got between your legs." Tony bristled. See what you did, Charlie? You made my brother a freak, killed the Don with a broken heart, and turned your woman into a beast, not to mention getting her killed. I'm sorry, Maria, I said. My voice cracked and strained as I staggered toward her. Listen to me. I just couldn't let Dom walk. I mean, go free, not after what he did. It was grotesque. I'm sorry. Her head snapped up again, her eyes blazing red above her broken nose. You're sorry? She spat. You think that fixes anything? I love you, Charlie. I always have. But I will never, ever forgive you. I don't care what Dom did. I grant you Dom shouldn't have done that to a child, but leaving me did not fix that, Charlie. Her American accent faltered, the accent she'd been perfecting for decades. That only happened when she no longer cared. The truth hit harder than her words. She loved me, but she didn't care about that. For 3 years, I'd convinced myself I was protecting her, that I was the martyr in some twisted tale. But no, Maria was not a wounded bird with a wing I patched. My eternal love had become the architect of my punishment, and she didn't care how much it hurt. You know, Charlie, Tony said, I was going to torture you a little bit, give you a taste of what Dom got in prison. Did I tell you it only took 3 weeks for some animal to break his spine? Cruel world, prison. After the torture, I was going to kill you. You're taking your sweet time, I said. But I realize now that your little woman is going to torture you like you've never seen before. Death ain't nearly that bad. Still, I gotta do a little something for Dom. Brothers is brothers. Tony shot me in the gut. It was a really good shot. The bullet sliced through my belly, right into my spine. It burned like someone jamming a red-hot poker through my belly button. The cracking of my vertebrae sent shockwaves through my body. I felt the ones above my waist, but not below. With the sound of thunder and squealing hinges, the warehouse door flew open, splintering the wood around the lock. Gil filled the frame, his trench coat billowing in the humid air like a storm rolling in over the Pontchartrain. Having him waiting in the car was one of the smarter decisions of my life. Jesus, Gil said as he surveyed the scene. Well, well, Tony sneered. What's the matter, big guy? Come to play White Knight? Or maybe just take Maria for a spin? She's a smooth ride. Gil grunted. You all right, Coop? He asked, ignoring Tony completely. I chuckled, blood running down my chin. Nope, I said. I got problems, but who doesn't? Gil nodded, looking at me when he should have been looking at Tony. Tony raised his gun. The shot rang out, and Gil stumbled back, clutching his chest. But even then, he didn't lose his composure. That the best you got? Gil forced out, his voice strained but unbroken. You disappoint me, DaCosta. Gil raised his gun. Before he got a shot off, Tony popped him again, square in the chest. As he went down, Gil's gun went off. The bullet sailed wide, hitting something metal behind me. Then Louisiana got its first earthquake in a million years when the big man hit the floor. Tony circled me like a predator, his revolver held loosely in his hand. You don't look so good, Charlie, he said, his voice dripping with mockery. All that righteousness weighing you down? Or is it the dead half of your body? Hey, idiot! You got bigger problems than Charlie Cooper, Maria said, her voice cutting through the gun smoke drifting around them. The chain binding her ankles sat at the base of the chair, one link split neatly in half by Gil's bullet. He knew enough about Maria to let her try her luck against Tony. Christ, you never shut up, Tony said. No wonder Charlie bailed out on you. Let's settle this, just you and me. Tony rolled his eyes and raised the gun, his hand steady, his grin mocking. Maria met his smile with her own. She took a step to the left. Dom sat slumped in his wheelchair, blood pouring all over his chest from a savage wound on his neck. Dom! Tony ran to his brother. Maria let him, licking her red lips as he ran by. What the hell did you do to him, you crazy... Tony stopped talking when he saw me and Gil get up off the floor. I looked down. The little hole in my belly was nearly healed. Gil looked solemnly down at the charred holes in his shirt. Damn, Gil said. Cynthia bought me this shirt. She's gonna be pissed purple. His mouth open in confused horror, Tony pointed the gun at me. Maria sunk her fangs into his wrist, and the pistol clattered on the concrete. Tony's eyes bulged as she slurped and swallowed. An instant later, Jill was there. He grabbed the other arm and twisted. Gil's sharp teeth glinted like razor blades when he smiled. Tony screamed. All yours, pal, Gil said. Yes, do it, Maria said. Her Eastern European accent was pronounced now. She had gone full Dracula. I see why you left. Why you did not want us to go through all this circus. It is unpleasant. Tony whimpered. Mostly unpleasant, she said. Just out of curiosity, why didn't you just kill them all? Gil asked. I shrugged. It's just not who I am. Plus, you never know. If they got wise, they might have figured out how to kill us, babe. Good point, my beloved. Perhaps I may forgive you someday. So you gonna do this? Gil asked. I need a whiskey. Maybe even pop a bottle of Dom. Maria squealed with laughter. Too late, Gil, she said with a look over at the lifeless man in the wheelchair. Gil caught up with his joke and laughed. I hate killing humans. I always have. It's so unsavory. I swore off feasting on the blood of men a long time ago, but my fangs slid out. Things change.